podcast. Today I'm joined by Inside the Pylons. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by Betfair Australia. No matter where you are in the world, if you're looking to find your edge in sports betting or racing, you'll need to visit the Betfair Hub. From analysis to betting psychology, it has everything that you need. Simply visit betfair.com.au/hub.
Today I'm joined by Inside the Pylons. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Jake. Good being here.
So we're going to talk wagering and a little bit of horse racing probably, and some general stuff around betting. To get us started here, do you mind just running through a bit of your history in wagering and as it pertains to racing?
Yeah, I started going to the racetrack when I was a kid with my grandparents, and just kind of mushroomed there. Became super interested in it, and basically from the time I was 16, everything I did was trying to get to the track and being at the track and betting and learning about betting, and then kind of moved on to other things, just expanded my wagering stuff. When I was probably 19 or 20, I started playing poker and betting on sports, and but I always went to the races basically every day, or bet on races every day. And it's just, I've basically done pretty much everything where a gambler can have an edge, from race betting on racing. Like I said, all the games where you can have an edge, playing at Betfair when it started, and just throughout the years, that's basically all I've done.
Do you recall some of the earlier edges that you were able to find, even as a teenager or a young man, that stand out, that obviously these days is no longer relevant and seems like a long memory?
When I first started betting and racing was pretty basic. It was, win, play, show, and occasional exacta and daily double. And then once it started to expand into, the first big thing was the pick three, and they had one a day. And that was basically, the first. They had pick sixes also. The pick sixes and the pick threes were the things I exploited pretty much when I was younger, knowing how to play them and figuring out how to play them. And then, other bets came on board, trifectas and superfectas. And, then the pick four came after that. And just basically the more complicated wagers was what I was looking at. And because being around the racetrack, back then you had to be at the racetrack, and you kind of looked around at your competition and said, I'm smarter than these people. And realized that the more complicated the bet was, the bigger edges you had. And, I tried to figure out everything I could with those bets, because the other bets were just, were basic, and there just wasn't big edges on them. The bigger edges were obviously in the more complicated bets. And that's kind of where I gravitated to and spent all my time learning the ins and outs of all of them.
What was the process of education back then? Was it just listening to people around the track and trying to navigate what was rubbish and what was useful for you? Or especially on some of those more complicated betting options, what were you able to do that others might not have been doing at the time to be able to get an advantage?
Yeah, it was just figuring stuff out, being a contrarian on a lot of things, like superfectas, for instance, when they came out. Like, I just noticed everybody would play in a certain area, a chalky area, and that if I could get outside of that area, that the payoffs were enormous and usually paid way more than they should have been. You could gauge it. You could see that the extra leg on the try, you could gauge it by looking at the try prices to the super prices. And that's how I figured out that getting that extra leg on something that wasn't something that everybody had was in that area was a huge multiplier. And so kind of, you just see things and you learn from there, and then you try to figure out the best way to exploit it. And like superfectas, that was one, you had to figure out that if you got the favorite out of the number, that everything multiplied greatly more than it should. If you got a big price on top, that multiplied it even more. Just little things like that. You basically had to figure out what you had to do to not be what other people are doing. And you needed to find races that fit that mold. And same thing with pick threes, pick fours. You just needed to find sequences that, you need to find sequences that could fit something to where you could be against the crowd. And it was logical that could happen. Just the crowd always gravitates towards groupings of horses or a horse in sequences. And you need to figure out what those horses are and find places where you can get away from the crowd and multiply, the payoffs enormously compared to what they're supposed to be. And back then the minimums were higher, and it was much easier to do, and the minimums made it to where they paid better. Now the minimums are a little bit lower for whatever reason. They should be higher, but contrary to what they should be, that's what racing's done. And now that the minimums are lower, people can spread a little bit more, so the area becomes wider. But some races, they become much wider, and other races, because they still keep the same narrows. So you need to know what races, you need to be able to figure out what races they're widening now, compared to the old days where you just kind of knew where they were because of the higher minimums. So it evolves all the time, and you just got to adapt and change with every new thing that happens. Shorter fields nowadays too. That's another problem, because everybody, that narrows everything down. So it's just getting worse, and you need to fight. The edges are smaller, basically, is what it comes down to.
Do you remember your betting approach back then, or betting strategy throughout the first, let's just say, 10 years of your betting life? Was it something you look back on and makes you laugh, or were you pretty sound even early on?
No, when I was early, I was crazy. Like that's one thing. Like I was wild. I bet whatever I had in my pocket. Just, it didn't matter. I was younger, and I could turn them. I could turn a toothpick into a lumberyard, and it was just different back then. I didn't care. I could win a lot of money. I could lose a lot of money. It was just basically play money. That's the way I looked at it. And it's okay to do that because you learn from it, and you need to learn. It does teach you one thing, which most people need to be as gamblers, and that's to be fearless. And if you've never learned the art of being fearless, then you kind of, when you have an edge, obviously, then you kind of, don't have that tool in your bag, which really propels you to the next level. I wasn't anything like I am today, but I take everything that I've learned from all of that and kind of molded it into what I think is, good to be, a great gambler nowadays. So, it's not so much plugging the leaks. It's just, basically you can not have leaks if you don't want to, is basically what it comes down. So you just kind of stick to the good stuff. That's basically the best thing to do if you're trying to win. So,
do you think you would be a different type of bettor or gambler now if you were betting $5 or $10 each race on a win, place, or show, as opposed to being more reckless and maybe more fearless, and also learning some of the don'ts pretty quickly and with larger losses versus something more conservative?
Yeah, I mean, everything you do kind of changes you. Like I told you, I was reckless. I was just crazy when I was younger, and then I leveled off and became more, conservative. But then back when I first got my rebate, I realized when I switched from just being a player that had to win without a rebate, which I was doing, then once I got the opportunity to get a rebate, I instantly realized that being reckless again was the right strategy. So I, I went from reckless to conservative to now realizing that reckless and creating volume, just throwing everything against the wall you could. And when I mean reckless, not just, I mean smart reckless, just trying to create as much volume and bet as much as quickly as you could was the right strategy. So I'd already had that at a younger age, and now I went right back to it once I first got the rebate. And, so like I said, things change. You have to adapt. Everything you do, you need to learn from and, learn what's right and what's wrong and be able to, figure out what the best strategy is moving forward with each situation, with each new situation you're given, whether it's a bet or a rebate or, a new track, something like that. It's just everything's new or changing in this game, basically.
Tell us a little bit about the rebate scenario, either directly as it impacted you or more broadly that you've heard about throughout the industry. Do you think that it was something that positively affected, I'll start with, professional gamblers first and we can talk more broadly, but do you think that was overall a positive thing for the sharper players out there?
Well, the rebates were definitely positive for the sharper players. It was basically, and the industry should have just lowered Takeout instead of giving rebates to its biggest bettors. But they were looking to keep their biggest bettors interested and possibly increasing their handle and, possibly bringing new people into the game, which will bet because of the rebate. Now, I think they should have just lowered Takeout for everybody. But once they did that and, it kind of messed that up. But when the rebates first started, the host fees were low and the rebates were huge. And now the host fees have gone up and the rebates have been cut dramatically. So it's kind of weaned a bunch of people off of wagering on races or cut their handle down dramatically. I'm a case of that. I used to bet a ton once I first got it. My handle increased dramatically, increased almost, over tenfold over a period of 2 years. I thought when I first got the rebate that my handle might double, at best. And like I told you, I immediately within like a week realized that that's not the right strategy anymore. But now as host fees have risen and the rebate has lowered because of the host fees rising and the product has deteriorated immensely all over the country, all jurisdictions. So you have prices going up and product deteriorating at the same time. It's just inevitable that your handle will go down. So that's basically where we're at now. And there's no change that's ever going to happen. Takeout's never going to be lowered in my guess, anything that's drastic, just the way the system's set up. So, rebates are basically the only way you have for a takeout reduction for anybody that's price sensitive or really wants to try to win at this game over the long run.
It sounds like before rebates you were more conservative, and obviously ROI would have been very critical, or at least your win percentage and win rate in order to make money. And then once that shifted to the rebates, you were more worried about volume. And at that point, did you need to net win out, or were the rebates even allowing you to lose a small amount and net you would have been positive?
Yeah, before the rebate, I obviously had to show a positive ROI. And to do that, I had to work diligently to gain the information before the races by watching videos and stuff like that and keeping notes. And, I had to do hours and hours of work every week, every day to be able to win without the rebate. And obviously when you're doing that and don't have the rebate as what I would consider as a crutch to boost your handle up, you can't bet as much either. So you can't bet as much and you have to win at a higher percentage to make X amount of dollars to make a living. As soon as the rebate comes into play, you now have an extra amount of money that you're getting from the rebate. So if you're betting, let's say you're betting $1 million a year and you're holding 10%, well, you're making $100,000 before, and that's without a rebate. So now if you get a rebate, and back then, the rebates were very good. If you get a rebate and let's say your handle bumps up to $10 million, but you're losing, let's say 8% instead of winning 8%, but your rebates back then was maybe 13%. Well, you're betting 10 million. So now you're holding 5% after the rebate, after you get the 13% rebate off of losing 8%. So now you're winning $500,000, even though you've gone from a 10% positive ROI on the million to an 8% negative ROI on the 10 million. You're still winning 5 times as much. So that's why you can multiply your handle so much, and your handle just escalates. And like I said, you spend your time, like as soon as the rebate came in, I spent no time now doing work and gaining an opinion to where I could win without a rebate, to now basically spending time working was a waste of money because I should spend all that time betting. And even though I was less sharp, you make more money that way because it multiplies your handle, and holding way less of a percentage after rebate is obviously way more money in your pocket.
Do you think you can, just hypothetically, be pre-rebate for 5 years, let's say, then you're on the rebate scheme for 10 years, and then you've got another 5 years after that where you're off the rebates? Can you bounce back from being someone who needs to win and needs to find a way to get to 10% ROI, for example, then going back into the negatives to be able to survive and make more money, and then being asked to go back to that must-win zone? Do you think that has an impact on your ability to do that, having a long period of time where you have more comfort, I would say, within the rebate zone?
It all changes. Like, you still need to be sharp, but you need to be sharp in the betting arena instead of the handicapping arena. It doesn't, like, I'm honest with everybody. I'm too lazy to do the work now. If I did the work and bet, I'd win more money. I admit it. I'd do better. But now it's just, since I went from doing no work and being able to bet a lot of money, and when I mean work, I mean pre-work. Like, I'll still look at a race for a minute or two, sometimes a little bit more if I realize I want to bet that race. But like, there's no more, looking 3 hours and doing the work on a one race card, before the race card. So what happens is, like, I've learned to do it the other way, and like, I could do better if I did the work, but I just, I don't want to do the work. I just can get by betting now. And even though the rebates have gone down, my handle has gone down because I'm more selective. I don't bet with reckless abandon anymore like I did when the first rebates come out. So that's where the drain is on handle, is that as the rebates go down and as the product deteriorates, then you need to be more selective. Like right now, if I just got a rebate from winning, I couldn't get as reckless as I was when I got my first rebate, 17 years ago or whatever it was. The game's changed. It's just different. Like I said, everything changes, and each situation's different. And like right now, there's no way that you could be as reckless if you were winning now and you went to a rebate. There's no way you could be as reckless. And just like if back then, if they took the rebate away, I could still do very well without the rebate if I did the work. Now, with the product deterioration, it would, I'm sure I could still win. And, there are years I still win without the rebate, win before the rebate, but it just would be very tough. It'd be very tough to do, go back to that. And pretty much want to try. If you're smart enough to do that, you're smart enough to do something else and make more money, is what it comes down to.
Yeah. What about the impact of rebates on the general betting community? Not necessarily the professional or sharp category, but just across the board, weekend warriors or, the retired guy that likes to read the form guide and place a few bets. Has that been net positive or net negative?
The rebates are just, extra money to the players that bet the most. It basically keeps the smarter people betting longer. And in any gambling game, anything that keeps the smarter people betting longer is going to hurt the unsmart people, at whatever level it is. The smart, and don't get me wrong, a vast majority of people getting a rebate lose. That's what most people don't understand. I mean, I know from the places I've bet what the percentages of consistent winners who get the rebate are compared to losers at those places. And it's astronomical. I mean, even though you're getting a rebate, that doesn't mean you're going to win. I mean, the highest place I've ever bet at was pretty close to 10% of people that betting at that place that, were consistent winners, which is scary because it's still telling you that 90% of people that are 90% of people that are getting a rebate are either losing or can't win consistently. They might win one year, lose the other, or whatever, or they might have one big score one year and then lose three, whatever. But of the consistent winners getting a rebate, it's way lower than people would think. Like, people think you're getting a rebate and you're automatic winner, and that's 100% false. I mean, it's so untrue, and like nobody believes it. And, it's tough for people to conceive because people that aren't getting rebate think, well, if I was getting a rebate, I would win. It's just not that easy. So, but the detriment it has is it keeps the winners in the pools longer and for probably more money, which takes away a little bit. But what it takes away is a fraction. I mean, 1%. You can't even estimate. Like, it might increase a loser's takeout by 1%, 0.5%. It can't be any more than that because there are very few bettors winning before the rebate. So they're losing too into the pools. So, with the bigger bettors creating liquidity and, it's kind of I'd say it's a wash just because it gives something to the little guys to fire at. And, it's any gambling game where the smartest guys are there's more smarter guys in the game. It's going to hurt the little guys is what it comes down to. But like I said, from the beginning, they should have just lowered takeout for everybody, but they didn't want to do that. They just figured they'd do it to their best customers. And this is the system they've got. So they're going to have to live with it.
Have you encountered many useful innovations across your time in the wagering space? I know you spoke about the Betfair exchange earlier, or mentioned it. Some of the expanded betting options through to pick 3 to pick 6 and things like that. Have there been anything that you thought were very useful changes and racing adapting to the wagering landscape?
Yeah, I mean, Betfair was great in its early days. It was, it gave everybody an opportunity to do what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it. And, it was much easier to win on there for the masses, created innovation. It brought people in that never played horses before, stuff like that. But then once they sold it, it became, and started with the premium charges and stuff. It just never was the same. I don't even go on there anymore, but people tell me liquidity's way down and everybody's been driven to their actual place where they book their own bets. So, but yeah, in the early days of Betfair, it was the best thing ever. And they should have, if they could ever get anything like that here in North America, that would be the greatest scenario possible. Just a free exchange. When I mean free exchange, I mean nobody throwing out winners or anything, or charging winners more. Just an exchange with somewhere between a 2% and a 5% commission rate and just let people, go at it, like, when Betfair was first started, I do my work, and, I'd like a horse and I take on the world, if everybody thought the horse had but everybody else, thought the horse had less of a chance, I'd just say, keep coming, and, stuff like that. And I normally just bet on, I didn't lay, and, I would find races like Turf Paradise, stuff like that, where I really liked horses and would just, take on whoever wanted to take on my opinion. And because I felt I was smarter than everybody else, when I really liked something. And, that was good. I mean, whenever you can capitalize on your opinion, and make good money off of it, and when you're right, at a low takeout, that's great. But then, like, they started not liking people that were winning and taking money out and not paying enough commissions, and that kind of got ruined. So, but that's the best thing I've ever seen that I think would drive racing into the next level. But like I said, once again, it would have to be the perfect exchange, like, just fair to everybody, and, kind of like some of the exchanges I think that are in Asia right now that are, run behind closed doors and stuff, but, great liquidity and stuff like that. But, racing would never allow that to happen here the way it needs to be done. So it's, a moot point, basically.
I want to talk a little bit about your philosophy on wagering. And I guess my first question around that is, when you were at the peak of your powers and you were, had your best ROI and things like that, are there any elements that stood out from that period of time that you remember, whether it be betting execution, whether it be some strategy elements, whether it was how you were handicapping and thinking about the race itself? Are there things that come to mind from that perspective?
Back then, when I was at my best, my opinion was great, and I knew how to attack my opinion. And that's the one thing that people need to learn, is when you have a good opinion and you get an opportunity to invest in your good opinion, you need to attack it. You need to attack your opinion in all pools that you can, that you need to attack your opinion, and you need to bet a lot when you do have that good opinion. And that's what I was always good at. A lot of people just kind of don't attack their opinions. They're more interested in staying alive or staying afloat, or, having money for 3 races later, or betting every race. But that's basically one of the main things that people don't really understand, is you need to bet exponentially way more money when you have a good opinion or a good opportunity than you do on lesser opportunities. And if you see, most horse players, if they have a great opinion, they might double their bet, which is utterly ridiculous. And it's just, and that's kind of what the problem is. Like horse players, their main link to failure, there's a million horse players out there that have a good opinion, but their main link to failure is not understanding how to bet. And whereas you get like sports bettors, in my estimation, it's completely different. Most sports bettors, their fault in making them lose is strictly money management. Like if you get a sports bettor and he goes 8-0 and he wins $2,000 going 8-0, well, if he goes 0-8, he might lose $10,000. Well, that tells, just by pressing and whatever, because that's the mentality in sports betting. Where horse playing, it's that it's kind of the same, but it's different, because you don't attack when you have your best opinions. And that's basically my philosophy. That basically would be my number one thing to tell people to do, is bet a lot when you have a good opinion. And if you need the action, bet tiny or not bet at all. And that's, I always tell people, just because they're playing just because they have a pick 5 or a pick 4 or a pick 6, you don't have to play it if you don't like it. It'd be much better to play, $480 in a pick five that you really like than $48 on 10 pick fives that you don't like. And people in racing just don't understand that.
How much in those situations where you had a strong opinion that was obviously backed up by handicapping or data or looking at horses in the yard or whatever it might be, what element of all of this is your intuition and just the gut feeling component that comes into it?
Yeah, intuition, like that's basically what I use right now. Intuition shouldn't be your strongest opinion. It should just be when I used to have strong opinions, and I have very few of them now. The only strong opinions I have is knowing a good sequence, but that's from looking at it from a betting standpoint and not from like a handicapping standpoint. Right now, that's kind of what I just go off of is intuition, just to navigate what I need to do to be profitable given the situation that I'm in and given myself by, like I said, not doing much work at all before the race and just having a feel for, what a good bet is. But if you're doing the work, if you're doing the work and you love something, intuition's pretty much, a secondary factor in my mind because you've passed intuition by having a great opinion. And, then you just need to learn how to bet it correctly. Intuition is kind of, in my, it would be like a medium thing. It wouldn't be the greatest. It wouldn't be the worst, but that's what I have to go on, just years of experience and intuition. And that's what I use, but, it's just, it's not, like I said, having a strong opinion is better than intuition in my view, but intuition can help you get through what you need to if you're just kind of doing what I'm doing, because that's basically what I use right now. And I could be so much better, but there's only so many hours in a day. So I can't do it. And I'm never really worked with anybody. And, I'm just a solo guy. That's what I do. And that's what I've always done.
Did you ever feel uneasy or uncomfortable when you had some of those big bets or big race days where you were outlaying a lot of money, or were you able to always have a pretty steady focus throughout?
Yeah, I don't really get uncomfortable, and that's what I talked about when I was young. You need to be fearless, and that's one of the things you have to. Just talking about this earlier with somebody, like you need, when you can learn the fearlessness when it doesn't matter, it's so much more powerful than trying to learn it when it does matter. And that's one of the things you kind of need to be when you're gambling at a top level, because when you feel you have an edge, you need to believe in it, and you just say, hey, I'm right here and I've got to go with it. And that's kind of like the fearlessness. And obviously when you feel that way, you tend to bet more than you probably should. And, it can impact you, and you just need to you basically need to numb yourself to what it can or can't do, or what it can and actually does to you. When you're gambling, it's just, you just need to believe in yourself that you're going to win. And that's kind of where the fearlessness comes in. And like I said, I learned that at an early age, and it's just something that bettors need to have. There are bettors that don't have it. And the bettors that I've seen that are good that don't have it, it actually holds them back because they don't do as good on something when they should be doing better than they are.
How narrow do you think people should think about focusing when it comes to racing? Obviously, there's a lot of racetracks around the world. There's even a number of betting options when we were talking about earlier with the exchange, certainly in other parts of the world. There's obviously pari-mutuels and then many different options within that. Many parts of the world, there's fixed odds as well, and each of those comes with their own triggers and trends and signals from that. Are you one to focus pretty narrowly on things, or are you happy to dip your toe into many different areas to try and learn and pick up things and then bring them back internally so you can make better decisions?
Oh yeah, I'm willing to do whatever I think I can have an edge on, or whatever, I think that there might be some weakness on whoever's, booking the bets or whatever. And, I pretty much my entire life, dip my toes in whatever, any gambling game that I think I have an edge on, and, that's how I got involved with Betfair when it first started, because I read about it and I said, hey, this sounds great. And, I investigated it and went there. And fixed odds, obviously, I haven't got too involved in that, because that's basically overseas, and kind of, it's very tough. Betfair was a little bit easier because you can control the computers off-site and stuff like that when it first came out. But the other stuff, it's the fixed odds stuff. It's winners. I mean, it's losers only. They bar winners. Everybody I know that's a winning player elsewhere, gets barred or limited. It happens here now in sports, as everybody is seeing. Just, I've played poker and, bet sports also. And, whatever with racing, there just isn't that many new opportunities on the horizon. You'll see bets here get introduced that are terrible. And, it's just like jackpot bets, jackpot pick sixes, racing roulette, which are just bad for the people betting them. And like racing roulette, that was a loser from the moment they introduced it. But yeah, there's just not a lot of options right now. It's contracting. They should fix racing should attempt to fix what they have right now, rather than making more. If a restaurant is serving bad food, they should fix the bad food they're serving. They should try to make the bad food they're serving better than introducing more bad food. And that's the problem with racing in North America, at least. They keep introducing more bad food to the menu instead of trying to make the food that they're serving more palatable to their customers.
Follow-up question for you. If you were to be the CEO of the American Horse Racing Wagering Authority, we just make that up, you have a 10-year contract and you're being paid $100 million per year because it's a very important task, and you have the authority over all racing bodies and people and groups in the US. From a wagering point of view, what's some of the things that you would think about to implement over that 10 years, or at least to talk to different racetracks or racing bodies or groups or wagering providers about, to try and reinvigorate things?
Well, first thing, as everybody knows, I would do is lower takeout, because racing has competition. I would have lowered takeout before they have competition, but now they have competition, which is staggering. You have to become price competitive with your competition. You can't. Racing tries to say we're price competitive with other tracks, but it's really scary when they say that, because they need to be price competitive with their competition. Their competition isn't other tracks, so is very price competitive, or it should be. How's that? It should be, even though it's becoming kind of not recently from the way things are going. DFS is way less takeout. Poker's way less takeout, obviously. So its competition is much better price. So you'd have to get the pricing down on racing drastically, not just, a couple points here or there. It would have to be halved, if not more. So that would be the first thing I'd do. But then you need to get more eyeballs on your product. So you need to get exchanges. You need to get on mainstream TV. You basically just need to get the snowball rolling, because right now, the way the takeout is, any new eyes on the game or anybody interested in the game gets killed immediately, because they just can't overcome the price that the racing is charging for their bets. It's just impossible. You need to make things easier on beginners to get interested and to keep going, not just kill them instantly. And that's what racing does. And that's its main problem. You can't have a blended 22% takeout and say, hey, people, come on in, learn our game. They get slaughtered instantly. And the only way people stay is just basically becoming almost addicted to it, which that's never going to hold a business over for the long run. You need to have growth. So first thing is lower the takeout. Everything else you can fix. You can fix, the mirror on the car. You can paint the car. But if the engine's blown, which is the takeout and the betting product that you're offering, nothing else you do is going to make that car a good car. And that's what racing doesn't understand. They bring people, they do things to bring people in, and then they kill them. And you can't do that. You need to have a competitive product and make people winners. Some people have to win. And right now racing has, so few people win that it's just incredible that anybody comes back. I can't imagine betting on races and losing every year. I can't imagine people doing that. It just makes no sense to me, because that's what 99.99% of the people do. They might make a score here and there, but over the long run, they're losing. And it's just sad that racing's become that. And you would think that with other forms of competition other forms of gambling right now coming on board that they have to compete with, they're still doing nothing. And it's just a bad situation. I feel sad for racing and the people that run it, and they just don't understand gambling and don't understand anything about their product.
What about for younger gamblers? Obviously, it's challenging if they're betting into blended 22% takeout pools when they're learning how to do it, and they're not going to be on the positive side of things generally anyway, so that makes it a challenge. But what advice would you have for them, or what would you suggest about educating yourself if you are in that range and you want to learn how to potentially build up your acumen in this space?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. Why we're getting no younger bettors is because they are educated. And as weird as that sounds, they have information at their fingertips. And, there's takeout rates out there, and, there's people that talk about horse racing, and the consensus on that is basically nobody wins. So young bettors see that. I've sat around at poker tables with younger people, and I told them I bet horses for a living, and they just laugh at me. It's like, well, how do you win? I go, years of experience, and they don't believe you. But after, if you play with them long enough, other people will tell them that he does win, and they can't believe it. And horse racing just kind of has a stigma to it that nobody wins, and younger bettors realize that. And if they do any research on it, they realize what the barrier to entry is on cost for data, if there's even any data out there they can do anything with. I'm not a big data guy, but all the younger generation is. You can develop younger fans that come out to the track once a year, once a month maybe, and will bet their $2 to have a good time, but that's not going to create any growth. You need younger bettors that become, I don't want to say lifetime gamblers, but steady gamblers on your product. And that's what needs to replace the older generation, which is dying off. And racing has none of that. And they don't have it because of years and years of killing everybody off. If a younger person, like my grandparents took me to the track and they lost all the time, but I became interested in it because I looked at everybody else playing and realized I was smarter than them. But I spent years and years of doing that before I could win, and studying, and I didn't have any, I'm not saying I didn't have any other options, but that was my option. I had one option. That was it. Now other people have other options and they just gravitate to those. So that's why racing is in big trouble with the younger generation. And, they'd be much better off going to sports betting, even though I have problems with that, because that's the one thing about racing. That's the beautiful thing about racing, is if you get good at it and you can win, nobody can tell you can't play anymore. Poker's kind of like that, except now the bigger games are private, and so technically they can tell you can't play. But sports betting, obviously, they tell you you're winner, you're out. You see all the things that all the bettors are going through, having to get partners and everything like that. But that's the beautiful thing about racing, is if you're good at it, you can wake up, go to your office, not have to deal with anybody, and just sit in your office and win. And that is the one thing that racing has going for it. But there are very few people that can do that. And I wish they would make it a gambling game to where more people could do that. But given the parameters of high takeout, many years of learning, and everything else, every other hurdle they throw up, deteriorating products, stuff like that, it's just impossible for the younger generation to get to any kind of a level like that.
Let me throw a very extreme hypothetical scenario at you. Let's just say we were able to put you in that position I referenced earlier, and you were able to lower takeout to 0% across the country. Extrapolate out over months and years and what impact that might have if the overall takeout was 0% and racing bodies were then forced to make money on ticket sales or broadcast rights or other things that were different to purely gambling.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible. I just don't think that's. Some tracks could lower it to 0% because they get 96% of their money from slot welfare. So their betting is, doesn't even matter. But the industry as a whole still needs betting, and they still need to derive revenue from it. Basically, if you could just get takeout down, I mean, it's never going to happen. But let's say you could possibly get takeout down to 5%. Well, if you could get takeout down to 5%, there would be 1 million more people that would start playing races. There's gambling dollars out there that want to come play at a game that they can win. To give you an example, whenever there's any carryover in the country, everybody that wants to bet to possibly win comes in and plays those carryovers. The pools, it just shows you can get a $10,000 carryover at a place, and they'll bet $100,000 into that pool. Whereas obviously the pool with no carryover before, had $15,000 on it, depending on takeout, whether they paid a consolation at it. So you'll get pools off of a $10,000 carryover that will increase by 5-10 times. And this is this happens every day, all over, every day, every track. It happens consistently because all carryovers is a takeout reduction. So the money's there if you give people opportunity. And it doesn't need to be 0%. I mean, I'd never argue for that. But once you get takeout down and you get increased interest, increased handle, increase eyeballs, increase the popularity of racing, then the other things will come. Like you said, TV revenue. Right now, racing basically has to pay to be on TV on most venues or most events. If racing became more popular, they would derive revenue from TV because popular sports derive revenue. That's all there is to it. So it's a snowball effect. But racing is a gambling game, and you have to make the gambling part of it the focus. And not only the focus, but you have to rev up the growth in the gambling section, and then all the other parts of it rise with it. And it's very simple. I mean, but that's the problem. gambling and racing is basically, I don't even, I'd say it's secondary to them, but I just don't even know. I don't even know how it couldn't be primary to racing, and for some reason it's secondary at best.
Yeah, and it's a similar trend in many other parts of the world, certainly people I've spoken to. We could talk for hours, but I will let you go. I just have one more question for you on networking, and whether it's in the early days when you were probably frequenting many different tracks and getting to know many new people and having conversations then, or even nowadays with, you just described sitting in the office potentially and being able to bet and making money. How valuable or important has it been to build a network, or is it something that you've relied on over the years at all?
Yeah, I mean, I have a very small network compared to most people, and that comes from kind of what I just said. I just kind of keep to myself and, just wake up and go bet horses in my office. And when I went to the track, I mean, I know a million people from my younger days of the track. I see them, I go, if I ever go to the track, which I go once in a blue moon now, I'll get 50 people coming up to me say, "Hey, how you been?" But as of people I deal with from when I used to go to the track, it's very few, 5, 10, 15, somewhere in that range tops. I know them. I talk to them once in a while, but yeah, I don't really have a big network of people. I just don't. And most of the people I deal with now, I've met after the track, to be honest with you. I'm not a big network. I have, a few close friends, and that's basically it. Whereas I know a lot of people that are into racing have a big network of people they deal with. Like I said, I try to keep like an inner circle of people that I deal with, and that's it. And I told you, that's one of the beauties of racing. I don't have to deal with anybody. I don't have to rely on anybody. I just have to rely on myself, basically. And that's why being good at racing is great. And I could have gravitated to these other things and other gambling games, and I have before, and I've done them all. But I've always done racing because of that factor. You basically, you are the one in charge, or at least I am. And that's the thing I like best. I don't have to sit with other people at the poker table that I don't want to be with. I don't have to be worried about told I can't bet anymore in sports, or have to deal with people that don't pay me, stuff like that. I mean, it's just so much easier betting horses. It's so much easier for me betting horses. If you can win at all of them, everybody's picking horses because you don't have to deal with the other stuff. But that's the problem, is that there's very few people that can win betting on horses.
Seems like they all have their own individual issues, but we'll save the further discussion for another day. I'd love to have you on again. I want to thank you for coming on and appreciate all of your time and insights for the podcast.
All right, perfect, Jake. Yeah, I like your show. I've listened to a bunch of them, and I like how you're just on topic and talking to people that know what they're talking about, and basically staying, off of the fluff topics and just talking, hardcore stuff that is truth and, accurate. So just wanted to let you know that.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.